Hello, this is Tony Speaks, and this is my lovely wife, Kim. We are the founders and co creators of the lifestyle brand and podcast, Becoming Disciplined. Every week we meet, learn from, and share best practices with highly disciplined men and women from a variety of fields and endeavors. Follow us on our journey. John Reid is the editor of the Prince William Perspective, an anti-racist news publication in Prince William County. Prior to launching this publication in November 2019, he has worked in a variety of local publications from his days as a sports editor at Northern Virginia Community College in Woodbridge to television production for the local broadcast show Teens Called to the Nations. In addition, he is an author, producer, and media consultant. He has covered such events from the Million Man March to presidential campaigns. He has been involved in youth ministry for more than 20 years. John Reid's passion is for using the platform of media to provide opportunities and to be a voice in the community for the disenfranchised. Becoming Disciplined, we interview CEO Mr. John Reid. Welcome to Becoming Disciplined, John.
Hey, brother, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to finally be here on the podcast. A pleasure to be here today.
Amen, amen. Now, John, can you tell me, as you know, because you're one of our hardcore followers, can you share with me your context? And this feels weird because I feel like I know your context pretty well. And just for the audience, I'll let you all know that Mr. John Reid is my accountability partner for a lot of things. And he's definitely a man of discipline, a man of standards. So that's why it's my pleasure to have him on today. But today, I feel weird asking this because, John's almost like a brother to me, or he is a brother to me. But you in the audience, y'all don't know what I'm asking him. And brother John, Mr. John Reid, can you tell us about your context so that our audience can understand where you're coming from? Where did you grow up?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was born and raised in Macon, Georgia, Bloomfield stand up. And, was raised there, born in 1976. We lived there until 1991, where my father, who worked as a liaison officer for the U.S. Postal Service, moved up here to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And also from there, grew in journalism, grew over from there, graduated Woodbridge High School, and then went to both Northern Virginia Community College, then Virginia Commonwealth University. I am a graduate of Grand Canyon University, Lopes Up. And then from there, I had always had a interest. Journalism was my heart. Telling stories was my passion. And even though I took the very unconventional route to get there, but even though I went through the unconventional route because I worked, in project management, I worked in education, but I saw what God was doing. He was giving me knowledge in different areas to prepare me to where I am today, where I am the founding editor of the PW Perspective, which is an anti-racist publication, actually Virginia's only anti-racist publication here in the Commonwealth. And so that's where we are at today.
Okay, awesome. Now, when you were growing up, would you describe your family as conventional or non-conventional? What description would you give your family growing up?
Well, when you talk about, just grow up in Georgia in the middle '80s, I'm a PK. For those who know, I was a pastor's kid, and so my father, the great, Dr. Bishop John Reid III, he was, but definitely we just grew up, in a sense, I guess. When you have, you're the youngest of four brothers, there's never anything such as conventional. I was blessed to have parents who have been married, by the grace of God, for 49 years, and are still going strong. And we experienced most of what what boys do. We were into Transformers, we were into GI Joes, we played, we went to play sports, wrestled a lot, each other most of the time, and just we discovered a lot of things. But at the same time, we were blessed to have parents who not only just talked about discipline, but demonstrated it. So, they set the model for us. They, told what was right and wrong. And when things went awry, they always brought us back to, hey, what is the word of God? So we were taught early in life about a standard, about how what a standard was and how to apply it. And those lessons are things that I try to take into my life today, whether it's in government or in business as a journalist. And so those are the things we experienced. And, even when in difficult times and hardships, it helped us to lean back on that word, which sustains us and keeps us focused on the greater picture. So I would say definitely we had many an unconventional moment, but the teachings were anything but.
Awesome, awesome. Now, what sports did you participate in growing up?
I was track, basketball, and baseball. I was still MVP of my 1985 team. Yes, they never take that away from me. And but it was basketball and track as well. And so I was I was more of an anchor on the 4x100 meter relays. I did those standing long jump, and basketball was a point guard. And I tell you one thing, and it helped matriculate me into a lot of my life is I always like to see myself as a point guard in life in anything I do. And for those who know what a point guard is supposed to be, like one reason why my favorite point guard of all time is John Stockton, because he made everybody around him better. His focus was not, hey, don't look at me, make others around you grow. Make sure if you got somebody who's better than you help them out as much as possible. And that's one of the things I try to take into my personal aspect into business, which is, hey, okay, if I'm the one, a good leader is supposed to make sure that everybody else is set up at the table. You'll get yours as time goes on. And so I always try to participate in something where I knew I could be part of a team. And whether it's, like I said, baseball, track, or basketball, it allowed me to be part of a community and know, okay, here's my role. I was never the star, or even the second star, or even the third star. I was what you call a great role player. I was a Ben Simmons in my team. Wasn't the one putting all the points up, but able to do all the little things that help the team grow as much as possible. So that was, like I said, those are things I try to take with me in my life, and things I, as a former coach, as a basketball as well. These I always try to teach players, and even in business is, hey, everybody has their role to play. Can you play your role? And, that's biblical in a manner of sense as well. So those are some of the things I did. And I found out early in life that, hey, I wasn't born I didn't hit genetic lottery. Okay. So I didn't hit genetic lottery. So I knew, okay, that NCAA scholarship is not coming. I knew I had to do other things other than try to be professional at sports.
Okay. Now you mentioned being the MVP, but you mentioned three sports. Which one were you the MVP in?
Oh, and baseball. It was for our little league team. I still got the trophy, and I tell my kids and grandkids in the future. Yes, at one time I was the best on my team, but of course we're getting our participation trophies. And hey, I can at least say at one point I had one good season, and I was washed up at 10 years old, folks. But maybe it was just God telling me, hey, I'm going to transition you into something even more than that.
Amen, brother. Amen. Amen. Now, you also mentioned that you coach young kids. What sports have you coached, and what skills are needed to become a great coach?
All right, well, thank you for asking. I'm coaching both basketball and baseball. And what I always tell people with a coach is this: the number one is you got to have great perception. You got to be able to know that, okay, you cannot come in with a preconceived notion of what you think every player should be. They'll coach that. Great coaches know who are the ones where they can get the talent out of each individual player. So I always started first with, when I was a coach, I always try to, of course, get the cooperation with the best players, because you get cooperation with the best players, everybody else is going to fall in line. But then I always say there are two things: always get cooperation with your best player, because everybody else is going to follow them, male or female, and then go to, whether it's basketball, the 12th man on the bench, or in baseball, the 25th player on your team, the one who doesn't know that they belong, the one who doesn't feel they have the same level of talent. That's the other one that you really got to focus on, because your job as a coach is to make, and I'll use basketball for instance, not only player number 1 great, but number 12 great. Make number 12 understand and buy into the same concepts. And I use that, again, I try to always say in both business, sports, and in ministry, that, hey, if this person can understand your role, then there should never be an issue of, well, why does the middleman not know their role? Because then it's about creating a culture. So that's what it takes to be a great coach: the ability to create a winning culture. And I'm not just talking about wins as far on the stat sheet. I'm talking about one where that 12th player, or that 20 in basketball, that 25th player in baseball can come in and knows, hey, they're a part of something, and know that whatever they learned before, whatever they were part of before, it's different over here. Because we're about team, we're about sacrifice, we're about the greater good. And players were always bought into that, and it was something that they were able to listen. And one thing the coach should be able to do is not only be able to communicate, be able to listen. It is imperative because not all players are going to respond the same. You will have extroverted athletes on your team. You will definitely have introverted athletes on your team. Ones who just, hey, I'm here to play. And yes, you will have those who think about themselves, who are thinking about, hey, I'm just doing this because I want to get my profile grow. You got to get them in line too. So a good coach knows how to communicate, knows how to create culture, and knows how to listen.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Now, let's shift gears a little bit here. What you went to two different colleges. What was your college experience like as a younger man, and then how did that change compared to when you went to Grand Canyon?
Oh, you know, two different John Reeds right there. When I went to when I went away to VCU, and I was thankful for going to community college, especially in the mid '90s, when at a time people, for lack of a better term, kind of looked down on community college. They thought, oh, you know, you're going there, why? Because you couldn't go to the big school. No, because we knew we weren't ready to go yet. And so it going there helped me understand the collegiate environment and the work I had to put in. But when when you're young and you're in college, when you go away, and even though I was just in Richmond, an hour and 15 away from home, there were some lessons that I learned. There were a lot of things I learned about different environments and learning about different experiences that even though I grew up in my teenage years here in Woodbridge, Virginia, it was somewhat diverse, but the diversity of thought I did not experience until I went to Richmond. And so when I go there, and now I'm seeing people from different cultures, from the 757 Tidewater area. I'm seeing people, out from California. I'm seeing people who are very liberal versus people who are very conservative. So now all these things are intertwining, and I start to find out more about myself as an individual and things like, wait a minute, wow, I really didn't know I was either very closed-minded about something and I need to be more expressive about this, or maybe some things I need to change my train of thought. So I experienced that, and it was challenging. It was challenging for myself because I'm trying to balance out two different worlds as a student and as a journalist. And I was thankful to be able to do a lot of things there as a journalist, but also as a student. But it was difficult trying to find that balance. But when I was older, and for those who may not know, after I left school in 1998, I did not return to school to 2015. And life happens. So I returned to school in 2015 and went to Grand Canyon University. Everything's in focus. Everything's there. Everything's like, okay, this is what I have to do. This is what I got to do to finish. This is what I got to do to accomplish the goal. Nothing was in the way of that. And this is when I'm a married man. I'm working full time, and I'm involved heavily in ministry. But I understood at that time the bigger picture. See, when I was younger, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand, okay, these are things I need to do because it's going to have impact later on in my life. When I went to Grand Canyon, everything was, okay, I'm getting this done no matter what. So if it meant, hey, I can't hang out with individuals, or B, I cannot do things, even with ministry, as good as it was, I had to focus on that goal. And I tell you, in 2019, when I went to Phoenix to my graduation, my family was there with me, with my lovely wife, Veronica, my brother, and my parents. And it was almost a surreal experience when I got a chance to walk the stage. And I remember the gentleman who spoke, and he was a motivational speaker. Matter of fact, I'd love to have him come on the show. I think he'd be great. And he spoke so much about just being all in on life, and the message he preached that day, and it was a sermon basically, and it really taught me about that, the value of going all in on something. And I learned that value of going all in when it was time to open up the PW perspective, which is something I knew, even though my degree was in business management, that the God always put that reporter spirit in me, and that was never going to be let go. So when the time came, I said I had to go all in. I had to commit myself, similar to the way I did when I went to Grand Canyon.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Now, wow, that's amazing, because the message I heard this morning, the title was "Going All In" from Ecclesiastes 9 and 10. So
yes, that's exactly right. That's where I got it from. That's where he talked from.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. So I guess you know what I'm preaching on tomorrow. All right.
Spirit, brother.
Now, who taught you your study habits? Or excuse me, who taught you your good study habits? The best version of your study habits, and how did those develop?
Hmm, that's a great question. And maybe surprised. It was actually a fellow professor, actually a professor, I should say, a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, and his name was Dr. Banks. He was my poli sci professor, and he was the one who actually got me interested in politics. And so, what he taught me was, how to effectively focus on a topic, and regardless of whether it was something that I felt was relevant to me. And so what he taught me was that a good student knows how to pull something out of each lesson he or she studies. They know how to make it relevant. So he would teach me that, especially in a lot of my thesis papers. And but he was very strict. I was always appreciative. And number one, it was great to see because he was one of the first Black professors I had ever met. But number two, he really took the time afterwards to get me involved and say, hey, as a student, you need to understand and how to pull certain things, be able to take it out and say, hey, what is the central point of what I'm learning here? And it really helped me out a lot in my future studies when I went to Grand Canyon, because every lesson, even on the things, listen, I'm not a math student, okay? I'm by no stretch of imagination. But I had to take calculus and it's statistics. But even in there, I was able to pull it out because I was able to apply it to ministry. I was able to apply it to my future endeavors as a journalist, and also be able to learn, hey, okay, I get it now. It was almost like that eureka moment, where the light bulb goes off. And so what happened is, I think it helped me later on because things start to slow down. So whenever I'm studying, whether it's the Word of God, whether it's in business, studying how to become a great journalist, other things in project management, or even just studying how to become a great husband. The things I want to learn in my finances. I say, okay, this is what I need to pull. What is the central thing I'm trying to grab from here? So it allows me to focus so that I don't get distracted. So when there's a lot of fluff around it, I know how to remove the fluff. I know how to take in the meat, spit out the bones. So it made it easier, which is why I believe my study habits improved as time went on. And so now I'd like to consider myself a student of everything, as much as I can take in all different aspects of society. When I'm watching the news, I don't just watch the news, I study it. I study and say, okay, they're talking about the vaccine. Okay, and I go back to what Professor Banks taught me. Say, oh, okay, this is a central point. And this is why it's relevant. And I try to put that into our stories as well, because it's part of what I believe we as society should be able to take in in addition to it.
That's good. That's good. Now, you spoke about your business, the Prince William perspective, and you also spoke about your point guard skills. Um, my question is, let's go 5 feet deeper. Let's go a little bit deeper on those two conjoining principles. How did you get the support of so many people in the community so quickly? How were you able to get the high quality interns that you've been able to get? And how were you able to get buy-in from political leaders so quickly? Because, there are many people who try to set up something and they don't always get the buy-in. People sometimes will just tell them to go buzz off. How were you able to get that buy-in, and how were you able to make those connections so quickly?
The grace of God. If you want a short answer, but I know that short answers don't make good for great podcasts. What I would say, brother, is that what it took was just being open, being honest, and saying, hey, it wasn't like I had a lot of connections. I'm going to be honest with you. And so when I started telling people that, hey, we are really just trying to tell our stories by us, for us. That was it. I was just up front and honest. I didn't have the elevator pitch. Everybody knows about the 10-second elevator speech you have to have. I didn't have it down to perfection. And there were a lot of times where, when we first started in November 2019, and at those times, like, okay, is this really going to be anything? Is this really going to grow somewhere? And I'm thinking, okay, I'll talk to a few people here and there, and maybe I'll, get a few interviews once a month, and it will be something. It will, and maybe people will like it. But I honestly thought it would be nothing more than just a regular everyday blog. That's what I'm thinking. But we know God's plans, God's thoughts are not our thoughts, right? And so what was happening was, as it was going on, all of a sudden one person told another person and told another person. And I'm sitting here now, I'm getting calls from people, and I won't say just highly elected officials in the state of Virginia who start calling. It's like, hey, do you have time for an interview? Matter of fact, I got a gentleman who called me, and my wife and I were going out to Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be out there doing an interview with him. And what way it happened was it was just a domino effect. It was, going to people and telling them, and then that person will tell another person in their network and say, hey, you need to go support this young man, what he's doing. And I was blessed because I happened to talk to the person one of the people I felt was most responsible for the start of PW Perspective, Mr. Donald Scoggins, and a guy who I helped actually try to support his campaign. And he put me in touch and said, hey, there's some young men you may want to, because he asked me, like, where do you want to take this? I said, my job is not only just tell a voice, but to give a platform for our people. He said, hey, here's some young people you may want to talk to. So he connected me out of just a Instagram conversation we had, and it just opened up the door. And there, of course, I met what I like to consider my partner in crime, Langston Carter, a superstar in his own right. And it just blossomed. It just blossomed from there. And that network led to that network, and led to that. And so I would say to people, to anyone, if you're starting out a journey, tell your story. Just be open and honest about who you are and what you're trying to do. You don't have to fluff it. You don't have to commercialize it. Just tell people who you are and stick to that. And that's what we stick to, and that's one of the reasons we've been able to reach out in the networks we've been able to get to, and be able to establish those connections.
That's awesome. Now, what type of discipline is necessary to thrive in the field of journalism? What would you recommend?
In the field of journalism, you better have integrity. And I know that's something that is almost a dirty word in a lot of mainstream media circles. We've seen it, sadly, over the past few years, where, and it's been going on since the late 80s, with the FCC regulations being changed. In journalism, you have to know who you are, and you have to understand your purpose. The other night, I was on a Zoom call with about 27 different Black journalists throughout the nation. Some worked at ESPN, others worked for CBS in LA, and I spoke with one lady, Miss Dorothy Tucker, who was one of the chief officers of the National Association of Black Journalists. And as we were establishing these connections, just talking about our stories, we said, what does it take, especially in this environment where now more than ever before, America in particular, in the world, wants to hear from Black and brown people. And so what I would say to be a great journalist, number one, you have to be able to subject yourself from the story. In other words, keep yourself, not just be part of the story. That's number one rule, don't become the story. But number two, ask yourself, okay, what's the purpose in this story? What is it? What's the meaning behind this? And who will it impact? And so the discipline to be a great journalist is number one, knowing the story. Number one, obviously doing your research on it. That's one thing I've learned in interviews, and that's just from my time in high school, from coming from high school, being able to know how to engage, how to be able to let the people know, hey, this is where you want to lead them. I use something with the late Larry King said it best. He said, 2 skills you got to have being a great journalist: ask the right questions, demand the right answers. And so those are the things, and you don't have to be, it doesn't have to take gotcha journalism. That's one thing I don't subscribe to, gotcha journalism. But it's to say, hey, this is what our people want to know, yes or no. And you can do that without having to become combative or have to be, argumentative to a point where the focus because you're trying to get information. Now, as a journalist, your job is to say, hey, I'm trying to get information from this person on this topic and try to get over this people. So you got to take care of the transition of information. If you can handle the transition of information, that's power. Because especially as you're interviewing political and elected officials, is getting that information can be very difficult. And so you're responsible for this. And it's almost the way I look at it as, okay, like a quarterback, the ball is in your hands. You've got to make sure to get that ball into the right people, all right, to the hands of the right people. And what they'll do with it is obviously their decision. But what you got to do, you have to be responsible about it. And I think as journalists also, we have to be attentive. We have to be able to capture the zeitgeist of what's going on. I always talk to my interns and my team members is capture the zeitgeist of what's going on around you. And a good journalist can understand that, can understand the times, can read the signals, and can be able to forecast when things are going. I know a lot of people right now. I'll give you a perfect example. We're a lot of us are talking about coming out of the pandemic. But one thing we also have to be mindful of is being ready, taking lessons. This is one thing we're trying to teach us. Be ready for the next big thing that's going to come, because history has always shown us. We are a roller coaster. We are one bad day away from society really changing. Look at October 29th, 1929. Look at October 29th, 1987. Look at 2008. There are many things that can take place. March 12th of last year. So we're 9/11. I can go on and on, but we always have to be prepared, because a good journalist knows when to be ready. So when the event happens, you're already ahead of the game.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, this is a good time to ask a question that I didn't even have written down, but it just made me, when I think of John Reid, I think about you have a broad bandwidth where, matter of fact, of all the people I've met in life, I think that you have the broadest bandwidth of anyone I've ever met. Okay. Where everyone else I know, especially disciplined people, they only know a field, or they know a field or two. Like there's like 2 or 3 things that they know a lot about. You're extraordinary because you know a lot about a lot of different categories and a lot of different sports, pop culture, what I call, because I'm part of it. I'm not saying it in a derogatory manner, but nerd culture. You see what I'm saying? Politics. Theology. A lot of broad different things. Has your mind always been that way? And how do you stay disciplined with so much information in your, because a lot of people, they don't have necessarily a good memory when it comes to that broad of a platform, or that broad of a bandwidth. How do you sort all of that data in your mind? And have you always been that way? And with that kind of bandwidth, is it hard to go to sleep at night?
Yes, yes, it is. Ask my wife. She's, Veronica's always always see me fidget a lot, because I always got something on my brain. And it's like, I don't know if people have seen on Facebook or on Twitter, there's that meme where the husband and wife are sleeping, and the wife is looking and saying, well, I wonder if he's thinking about other women. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm here thinking, man, I wonder why Baby Yoda had to go with Luke, or I'm thinking about, wow, where's the next the stock market, and my brain is just going on. And it's always kind of, it's been that way. And I believe that it's because, and I can say as I'm older, it was always my business to know. I make it my business to know. But number two, it's because I like to attribute it to the era which I grew up in. Because, we grew up in the era, we were raised on television. We were exposed to a lot of things where, and I say that, when I say that term, I want people to understand, I'm not saying it and say, oh, my parents weren't involved. No, they were heavily involved in our lives. But we were involved in an era where, in the early 80s, you got to see things that, the exposure of cable network and television. And one of the things I was attracted was CNN. And I remember watching and I will watch it nonstop. I'd have my, like I said, we'd watch our He-Man, we'd watch our Transformers, but I was always turning over to CNN. My brothers would get annoyed by that. And when I was always carrying on to the TV, because I wanted to know more about the world around me. That's always been the case. I always tried to see, like in whenever I was in school, if I knew somebody was of a different culture, I would try to submerge myself in, like, hey, well, what's it like? What's it like being, being from India? And I had students, and this is growing up in middle of Georgia. What is it like, growing up in Brooklyn? What's it like growing up in Africa? And so I would just always have that curiosity of knowledge. And so, because I didn't see it, especially in my own neighborhood, and I was always curious to it. But as you were talking about discipline earlier, and what discipline me is understanding, okay, what is it I'm trying to gain from this? What is it I'm trying to learn from, not just for myself, but how can I understand their way of life? So often we grow up with this segmented mindset of, okay, me, my four, and no more. And I was able to learn that diversity of thought because it helped me so that when I would talk with people from different cultures or different backgrounds, I learn about different things. Like, for instance, I wanted to learn more, like I said, when the stock market crashed, or whether in '87, or learn more about politics. Of course, the Iran-Contra affair. It was the reason I wanted to learn about those things was because I said this is such a beautiful world. This is, you open it up, it's like a kaleidoscope. There's so many different things that you can pick and choose from it, and so I was like, well, why is this the way it is? And so as I got older, I began to understand, hey, this is why how society works. So now as a journalist, I look at it as learning about these different things is, hey, how can I take this topic? How can I study this and say, how can it impact a generation? How can it impact our people? So it's always been that way. And you're right. There's always this mindset of, okay, I got to learn about this. I got to learn more about finances. I have to learn more about the environment. And it's something I've been blessed with. And so it keeps me engaged. But yeah, it does become difficult because you're always studying, you're always reading. I'm up, 6, 7 in the morning, reading the AP or reading things on a local level, studying consistently different cultures. I'm studying news in Africa. I'm studying news in India. I'm studying news in Japan because I want to know, hey, where's the next trend coming from? Where's the next thing that's happening that I need to be a part of? And so I think that the discipline part comes in terms of this is why I need to know this. So I can understand, because when I hear people, especially in mainstream media or just in Twitter or what have you, talk about things from a very myopic point of view, it disheartens me. And so I try to say, hey, can I lighten the conversation a little bit? Let's get a little deeper, because God created this world to be diverse. He created it with different subsets. He created it with different mindsets. And so we have to understand one another and not just be so focused on ourselves, because the more we become open to other people, the better things are. And those are the things that I always try to take back with me when it comes to understanding different things, because like I said, we are in a Baskin Robbins lifestyle. There's 31 different flavors. Why not, try to pick from each one, decide what you like, what you don't like.
That's awesome. That is awesome. That is really great. Now, what tips or tricks do you have regarding note taking? Because I want all the young journalists out there to know that you're not going to always be able to turn on a recorder for some interviews, because some people are going to react adversely if they see a recorder underneath their nose. So what tips do you have for note taking? Do you have any?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, what I tell for people good note taking is the ability to always take from your verbs, right? I always like to focus on the verb and the action. And when a person is talking or they're saying, like I said, they're responding to a statement, I always like to say, I always tell young journalists, what is the action item you're taking away from this? And this is where I'm using project management. And because we focus on it, because readers want to know what the person is doing and what the person is thinking, right? And so I sadly, I see too many times stories are written and talk about, how the scene is or how things look around it. At the end of the day, readers want to know, hey, who, what, when, where, why, where, and how. Okay, and obviously, answer the 5 W's and the H is the foundation. But try to get a little deeper here. Is young journalists, I always encourage them, what's your takeaway from this? What is, if you can leave the reader with one big takeaway in that story, you've done your job. And it removes a lot of the fluff. Again, I was saying earlier about the fluff. It removes a lot of the nuance and gets right down to it. Now you can add it for context if you need to, and it's great to have. It's always got to have context, but at the same time, don't let the context be the story. Let the action item become it. So wherever that person is thinking. So when you're writing down your notes, all right, always write with the purpose of what is the verb, what is the movement that's taking place. Because again, you're handling a transformation of information, right? So if a person says this is what we need to do, okay, now to do. Now that's why I focus on to do, and then I go from there. right? Because I can come back later on and get the other stuff later. But once I hear that verb, that's where I start, right there, and start writing down my notes. And because then what happens is what you're doing is you're taking, this is where you're going to be a good English student. You're taking the vital part of the story. And especially, even if it's a story where you're interviewing someone, and say, for instance, they're releasing a book, and you're saying, okay, well, they've already done the action, right? So what you want to do is, when you're taking notes, you also want to take a point of what was the key point where they said, this is why I did it. And once you hit that word because, go. So with every 5 W's and the H, once that verb comes afterwards, that becomes your starting point. And then you should be able to take your notes and write it from there. So if you could do that and then have your subject at the end, you can bring it back all together to the context of your story.
Oh man, that's some good stuff, brother. You are a treasure, my brother. You are truly a treasure. Amen. Now, I had 1 year as a journalist, and I did not do the best of managing relationships, and in particular, I didn't do a good job of managing relationships with law enforcement. I kind of got too cozy, and accidentally became a propaganda tool. Um, how do you manage relationships? Because on one hand, as a journalist, um, you need access. If you want the scoop, you're going to need access. You're going to need to know what's going on, and those calls from officials that say, "Hey, this is about to happen," it's invaluable. But at the same time, when you get too cozy with those guys, then it can kind of get in the way of the truth coming out. So the question is, how do you manage those relationships, and what advice do you give to young reporters about cultivating those relationships, but then not allowing yourself to get used in those relationships?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's a great question. Matter of fact, if I may, let me share a perfect example. Our publication was very supportive of Qasim Rashid's run for Congress, right? And we would see him a lot. I would talk with him. I personally interviewed him, and he was a great access of information to us. And then we got a lot of grassroots support for his campaign. But there was a story that we had to publish, and it was about his relationship with the Muslim community. And at the time, there was a lot of pushback. Let's just put it this way. And I came to a point where, as an editor, because this is for young journalists, where you have to segregate yourself from the person. Your focus has to become on the people. Your focus has to become on the community itself. And so I decided to go with the decision, and even my entire staff wasn't necessarily on board with it, and I understood that, and I respected their wishes. But I said, we have a responsibility at times to do this. We have a responsibility to tell the truth. Be responsible. Our responsibility is not to the politician. Our responsibility is not to the law enforcement. Our responsibility is not to the board of county supervisors. Our responsibility is the community. And if we're talking about walking in integrity, then the number one thing we will do is we will be open to the community, because they're our stakeholders. They're the ones that hold us accountable when we aren't doing our job. And so we published a story. You got a lot of angry email. I can still show you the emails we got from his camp to this day. But at the same time, they understood why we did it. They understood that, hey, these are the things we promised. It goes back to what I said earlier. We have to demand the right answers. So to young journalists out there, yes, it's important to get that access, but at the same time, we, not without telling it directly, but indirectly letting people know, hey, my responsibility is not to be a propaganda tool for whatever the people are reporting, or to the people in charge. My responsibility is to that underserved community that has felt ignored. My responsibility is to that young college student who feels his or her voice is not being heard. So that's who my responsibility is too. So that's what it helps me not to get influenced. And I will say this now, especially when you're a Black-owned publication, there will be a lot of candidates. There'll be a lot of people who will try to influence you. They will say, hey, can you put this out for us? Can you put this? And every time I have a treasure chest of no's. Every times I said no, because it does not fall in line with what we are. and they'll say, okay, thank you. And some aren't happy about it, and others are. Others appreciate the honesty, and they know where we stand for. So that's one thing I can take back, that I'm proud to say, that along with our wonderful team, that we have our principles that we stand on, and that is the culture of the PW perspective. And so when someone tries to influence, again, to young journalists out there, understand the greater good, and that will mean sometimes having to say no, because it's better to walk away with integrity. Lay your head down at night knowing you did what was best, rather than looking back at yourself and questioning your motivations.
Okay. Now, one of the reasons why we are in a democratic republic is because the general public a lot of times is ill-informed about the details of issues. Um, as a journalist, you're privy to information that the general public might not be focused on or aware of. How have you resisted the inclination to not judge your audience for their blissful ignorance? Because a lot of times you can kind of see what's really important, and then sometimes, at least from my experience, and at least from other journalists I've experienced, you will find something very, very important and post it, and then the public might not be interested at all. And then there's other things that you might post just because you think it's, like it might be a filler, or it might be something that you don't think is important at all, but then it gets all kind of hits. And that, at least from me and from other reporters I've spoken to, that was very frustrating to me. Like there was times where I was talking about serious, real issues that affected people's, taxes and public policy, and I would post it, and people would be like, "Oh, next." And then there's other times where I would post something fluffy that really, to me, I was even debating whether I should post it at all, and it would go semi-viral. How do you get past those moments, and how do you kind of not get frustrated with your audience when that happens?
That's a great question. I can give a perfect example of that. I remember we did a lot of articles on the Racial Social Justice Commission here in Prince William County, and I'm thinking, okay, great. This is what people want to talk about. This is, Prince William County is at least trying, as a minority majority county, they're trying to do something in order to bring awareness to a situation, that's long overdue. Crickets, got crickets on it. And then I the other day I put up an article, an editorial on Derek Jackson. For those who may not know, was the social media influencer who confessed to infidelity. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this because there'll be people ask, hey, address it. Of course, naturally that blows up, right? And I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, I'm not good. And it's hard because I resisted the urge to write that story because I said I'm not going to go down the TMZ rabbit hole.
Right.
People at TMZ do great work, so I'm not saying TMZ. But what I'm saying is we're not become celebrity chasers. Okay, that was one thing I said I didn't want to do. But of course, naturally, that gets all kinds of hits, all kinds of shares, all kinds of comments. I'm like, oh, great. And now people are going to expect that. It is frustrating at times as a journalist when, as you say, because one thing to put that perspective, we don't just want to educate people. Our goal is to empower people. We have one of the things we're going to be reducing, I guess, from doing a spoiler alert here, we're going to be doing a series of financial literacy courses, because we to help engage community in things that, quite frankly, I wish I had known growing up, especially in my 20s and early 30s. And so, but I find when we put those out, they get maybe one or maybe a couple of shares, if that, maybe a comment, if that. But let me put something about, this elected official is not doing their job, or editorial. It goes through the roof, and it's all over every post on Prince William County, post on Facebook. One thing I realized is it's almost like you've been being a pastor. One thing I've learned throughout history is being able, the messages that hit the hardest are the ones you would never see coming. It could be a point that you think is totally innocuous, but what happens? It hit home. It hits home. It hits that nerve. And that's just the way it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We are a cornucopia of different mindsets, different, viewpoints. And while obviously we want everybody to, our goal is to make everybody Ivy League educated with our articles. We want everybody to say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. But we also know that the way the human brain works. And you, as a journalist, you have to understand human behavior. You have to understand human behavior patterns. Not saying everybody's going to flock to this. Don't do a whole bunch of stories on the Kardashians or whatever. But at the same time, understand that there are some things that's going to affect. We know stories that may hit the Lake Ridge community, Montclair won't care about, or stories that will hit over in Haymarket won't touch Occoquan. They could care less. And it has nothing to do with being localized. It just has to be, hey, like for instance, the Royal Crescent, for those who live in the Prince William County district, the Royal Crescent is a big issue right now as to what's being done about that and where it should be conserved or what have you. And we will get most of our comments, and in some cases, some of the vitriol from the western end of the county. But of course, down to Dumfries, okay, it's whatever. And so, as a journalist, I try not to I try not to take it personal. Now, I try not to take what we report because I understand that, okay, not everybody's going to feel the same way. And I know not everybody is going to feel the same way. I just have to know, hey, am I hitting the Featherstone community? Am I hitting Manassas? Am I hitting this community? And if it's making a group community of people saying, hey, yeah, okay, all right, may not work for Joe and Susie over here, but Bobby and Jill, hey, wait a minute. That really touched them. Okay, great. And that's the most important thing. So at least I can rest knowing that, hey, we did our part. We did what we were supposed to do. And that's what we do as journalists. And so those are the stories we try to produce that really knows that, okay, if one segment is going to be impacted in a positive way, we're doing our job.
Now, if you had to give advice to a young John Reid who would start a similar business in, let's say, Caroline County. Caroline County right now is a news desert. And there's around, I think, 13, if I remember right, there's 13 other news deserts in Virginia. Mm-hmm. So if you had to give advice to a person, a younger John Reid, starting a Caroline County, or matter of fact, there's another news desert in King and Queen County. There's another news desert there. If you had to give advice to that person starting a newspaper in a smaller venue, if you had to do it all over again, would you set up the Prince William Perspective as a for-profit or as a not-for-profit?
Well, you said young John Reid. The first thing I had to do is get him to sit down long enough to talk to him. But so if I can get the young John Reid, if I can get John Reid of 1998 to sit down long enough, and yes, I'll be able to really knock some sense to him. But I would tell to someone, number one, not for profit, because that's what we run. I believe as a journalist, it's not about the money. It's not about the income. It's about the outcome. And that's the way I look at the PW Perspective. And so to me, the profit we receive comes in knowledge. It comes in empowerment. It comes in the ability to say, hey, we are impacting our community. I would say to a young John Reid, if you're 22, 26, 31, and you're interested in starting a newspaper, my advice to them would be, know your why. Know your why. Write it down. If people, when I prayed about what was going to be the PW Perspective about, and it just came. It was like, being the voice of the silenced minority. That's it. That was it. And there was nothing else needed to be said. It wasn't about, okay, let me do this as a get-rich-quick scheme or whatever. No, journalism, don't let the mainstream media fool you, okay? And that's it on top of gold here. But I've been blessed in receiving influence. I've been possessed, like you said, in connections, in stature, and being a voice, a refreshing voice in a community that desperately needs it. I would tell that individual, know your why. If you can know your why, because here's what's going to happen. Knowing your why is going to keep you sustained when only one or two people are reading your articles. Knowing your why is going to keep you sustained when that elected official tries to slip you and send you an email or send you a text saying, hey, can you write about my campaign? Or can you talk about this? It's going, knowing your why is going to help you when someone sends you an email, as we get, like 12:04 on a Saturday night from somebody saying, hey, I've got some dirt on somebody. Hey, on this reporter or this politician, you mind putting it out? No. Knowing your why is what's going to sustain you when the dollars aren't coming in. Knowing your why is going to keep you when you have people calling you, and I'm just, some of the things that I've gotten, a member of Antifa, or, I am a racist or insurrectionist, and you get them all. Once you get past the first 5 or 10 comments of those people calling you that, you get used to it. Okay, all right, it's whatever. Love you anyway. God made you special. All right, bless you. Keep it moving. And but knowing your why. So if you're in a news desert, I highly encourage anybody watching this right now. Do not let what you see on mainstream media confuse you or disdain you or dissuade you, I should say. Independent journalism right now is such a need. Independent journalism is the backbone of the community. Don't look to the, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, OANN, Newsmax, I can go on and on. Democracy Now, great journalists, Free Speech TV. I can go on and on about those who really do fight the good fight, those who really do carry on the flag. But the world needs independent journalists. The world needs more voices. I remember, real quick, I remember when I was talking to a friend of mine 2 years ago, great friend I went to school with, and he was a longtime journalist in Richmond and in Tampa. And I remember telling him, hey, I'm thinking about starting a newspaper. And he was very open and honest. He was like, are you sure you're going to be able to get into this market in Northern Virginia? I said, yes. I was steadfast because I knew, this is what I prayed about. I said, yes, because there's a need for us. And, this is with, hey, shout out, all respect to Potomac Local, Inside Nova, and Prince William Town. I said, no, it's not about us taking away their piece of the pie. It's about adding our own flavor. And we did that. And now we get people come back and say, thank you, because you took back a narrative that was taken from you. And so I tell that to every journalist, take back the narrative. If you are frustrated with the lack of news in your community, take back a narrative. That is the focus for us. Because here's the thing, brother, is every time we don't write and we get frustrated, we're not seeing things progress or what have you, we think to ourselves, every time we don't tell a story or report to our community, someone else is going to report it in their own language. And we can't let that happen. It is not so much us versus them. Let me make this clear, because I have a lot of friends in the journalistic community as well. But what it is that no one can tell our stories but us. No one can tell it, no one can teach the stories. It's like in the ministry, unless you know who Jesus is in your life, you can't tell the story, and so if you talked about earlier about knowing things and being as knowledgeable as possible, if you have an opportunity to teach it in your be a voice in your community, do so, because somebody is waiting on you to be their voice. Because they can't express it themselves. They want to say it, but they can't. So there are so many news deserts which need independent voices right now.
It's good. That's good stuff. Now, we're in the home stretch. We only got 3 questions left for you. We look at discipline and becoming disciplined from a holistic standpoint. We look at physical discipline. We look at data organization. We look at home organization. We look at financial management. We look at spiritual disciplines. We look at kind of like the broad spectrum of discipline. Where would you consider yourself extremely disciplined, and then where is an area that you feel like you need some extra work or development?
Well, I always feel that number one, when it comes to, I'm very disciplined in terms of information management. We get tons of stories, tons of requests, and I'm thankful for each one of them. We are a staff of 8, and I'm thankful for all the volunteers who help us, become what we are. We are a true community publication. One of the things we have been very good at is handling, not only handling information, processing it, but obtaining it. And this comes from every day. My wife will tell you, I am up till midnight looking up, talking with people, or emailing. The other night, there's a story. I can't reveal it here yet. I have a few sources I have to verify, but there's some stories about education that I was studying up. And so if I'm working on education, another person's working on another interview. And so that's one of the things where we've been data management and information, we've been able to be very disciplined on. I would say if there was one area, I would definitely say physical discipline. I think I realized that, and when I got to like mile 5, I started realizing the lack of physical discipline. So I thank you so much for your gracefulness and humility and just flexible with me today. But on a personal note, I would always say that there are areas in which I need to be disciplined, really more so in continuing to move the meat from the bones. And here's what I mean. Sometimes when you're a journalist, and if you're a media producer, regardless, your number one job is content. Content is king. And sometimes I've learned I have to also be understanding of, okay, not every story benefits, not every story empowers. And so I have to be able to be more disciplined in that area as well. I also, continue to understand that, hey, as a business, we are a business, and understanding the business portion. That's where I'm growing right now, is really understanding that not I'm just a journalist, but I'm making the transition from a journalist to a CEO. And when your whole life has been, hey, we are about telling stories, now you have to see things differently. And being able to make tough decisions. Sometimes that is, people will send resumes and they'll send requests, say, hey, I want to be a part of your organization. Sometimes I got to make decisions and say no because of budgetary reasons. And that's hard for me. That is hard. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey. I was the Mr. Yes. Hey, can we write it? Yes. Can I help? Yes. Can I do this? Yes. Not because it was out of, I didn't want to be people who sad. It's just because I always say, hey, how can I brighten a person's day? If I say no, I'm questioning, I can be quenching their spirit. I crush their spirit. I don't want to do that. But the hardest part is saying, oh, some things we can't do because I got to stay on budget, and anybody who knows, and I tell this also to young journalists, expect to be in the red for a while. Expect to be in the red. You got to be able to take that L. But here's the thing. It does change over time. It does change. And so if I can try to manage that and learning, okay, I'm not just a reporter. I am now also a boss. And my staff, who are the greatest people I've ever worked with, understand that. But I learned sometimes they'll come with requests, and I have to say, no, we can't do that. And I feel bad because I want them. One of the things I would like to do is help people explore new opportunities. Like, for instance, one thing I can share with you now that was official, we will be doing our first documentary later this year about the expansion of the Darwin Mosque over here in Manassas. And one of the things is, I didn't think it was possible, but of course, God's ways are not our ways, His thoughts are not our thoughts. So those are areas I would say is making that transition from being just a journalist to a CEO.
Okay, awesome. Now, second to last question, what book would you recommend for people who are seeking discipline that's outside of the Bible? And then are there any books that you would recommend to young aspiring journalists?
I can answer that question, both questions in one. Jolt by Phil Cook. Phil Cook to me is my Yoda when it comes to me, other than yourself and a few other people. Phil Cook to me, for those known as a Christian producer, filmmaker, I would recommend that book, the book Jolt, because it really touched me at a time where I really needed to understand who I was. I was just going through a difficult time in my life, kind of at that point where I was at a crossroads. This is pretty much around the time where I was ready to go to the Grand Canyon, return to school. And I bought the book, and it really taught me a lot, because one thing I love about Phil Cook is he takes aspects of the Bible and puts it in a very I would say contemporary context where you can study it and anybody can read it, but like, yes, that's me. That's what I need. Whether you're in finance, whether you're in education, whether you're in politics, it touches all over. It hits all points. Say, okay, I need a shakeup. This isn't working. This isn't who I was made to be. This isn't who God made me to be. And so when I got that book in 2015, it really opened up my eyes to what could be and what should be. And so I recommend that for anyone really just trying to understand where they're going in life. Even if you're not a believer, let me make this clear. If you're not a believer, it will apply to your life. And I remember I got a chance to talk with him in 2017 in Orlando, and got signed one of just the most surreal moments of my life. And he said the same thing. He's like, because I remember his story. He shared with me his story about when he was 36 years old, married with 2 kids in Oklahoma. He had just gotten fired from media ministry at his church. And he was like, I need to do something different. This isn't working. This isn't who I was made to be. So he and his wife, Kathleen, got their 2 kids, girls, and moved out to Los Angeles and found the Cook pictures. The rest is history. And so I kind of like relate myself in that, because again, I didn't take the conventional path to journalism. I didn't come out of college and get a reporter job right away. I had to go through some things, but it was books like that that really encouraged me to do that as well. But if I have to say one more, I always like to use, because he's my favorite author, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell, David, Goliath. I would say Outliers. Outliers is another one I highly recommend. Outliers teaches you a lot about just what it takes to be successful, not just in your business, in your calling, but in your personal life.
Good recommendations. Now, Mr. John Reid, first of all, we just want to thank you for coming on board. I appreciate you. I appreciate your presence in our community. I appreciate you as a brother and my accountability partner. I can't say enough positive things about you. You are definitely one of the more disciplined people that I've met in the world today. And I just appreciate you for coming on with such short notice. We want to turn things over to you. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to speak to our listeners? And for if you don't know, our listeners are typically people from age 30 to 55 they are striving to do better. They're striving to become a better version of themselves. And before I turn things over to you, let me just pause for a moment, because we have something we don't normally have to consider. We actually have an audience member, Pastor Jeremiah Marshall. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask our dear brother John Reid? Pastor Jeremiah has been hanging out with us.
Oh, what's going on with Jeremiah? Man, that was always an awesome man. A man who knows about community.
Amen. Well, he's a little bit on delay because he's on Facebook. So. He says, he wants to ask you about your jogging experience today.
Oh, boy. All right. Here's the thing. All right. Like I said, my athletic days were long gone. Okay. But I ran 7 miles today. I usually go, for those who are in the Woodbridge area, normally you will catch me 2 days a week. I'm over there on the trail of Lake Rail Prince William Parkway, because that is, to me, and here's the thing about jogging. You want to talk about discipline. I am a person who is very, as you say, very structured in his approach. And one thing I'm blessed, my wife knows, okay, when he's running, he's going to go focus. And when I'm exercising, I focus. I abhor, and this is no disrespect to anybody I know before, but I abhor running with other individuals, because my focus is John Reid needs to focus on his pace. I can't run your pace. You can't run my pace. Okay. And that's another story, but other things. But when it comes to running, one thing I tell people, put one foot in front of the other, don't stop. And when you hit your threshold, press on, press on. And so, one of the things I love about going there, that's for the hardcore runners. I cannot run in areas, I cannot run on tracks because there's too many people. I like to be able to. My dream is to find a open desert road and just keep running. Not run too late with a coyote, but run, and be able just to keep running. But it's because I love, number one, like I said, being outdoor with nature. But number two, it helps me because I build up resistance. Because one thing about the Lake Ridge area is it's a lot of hills. So it helps me build up resistance, and not just physically, but mentally. Because I know going in, like, okay, I got these inclines I got to deal with. I got to go up. All right, here's where you pace yourself. It's just like in life. There are times when you got to slow down. But there's other times you got to be able to say, okay, I got to pick it up. And so that always going that trail helps me because I know you're not gonna get no weekend walkers on there. Okay, that's for the hardcore folks. And so that's the max level. And I always like to measure myself up on the max level because if I figure I can hack it there, I can hack it anywhere.
Awesome. Now, getting back to our last question,
Mm-hmm.
our audience is people from 30 to 55. They're striving to be better. They're looking to become more disciplined in their life. First of all, we just want to thank you for coming on. We can't appreciate you. We can't express our appreciation enough for you coming on last minute. But what are your closing thoughts for that audience who is striving to be better versions of themselves?
It's never too late. If God has made us unconventional, He's made us unique, and we are made in His image. The reason I say that is because I want, if my life can inspire that 35-year-old person who maybe didn't finish college, didn't get the $60,000, $75,000 job coming out, didn't have a trust fund, didn't have, or not just that, just life happens. Tragedies happen. For those who may not know, I lost my brother, sadly, to gun violence in 1998, and more recently, my nephew. I want that person to understand. You may be, if you're watching this, you may be sitting at a cubicle, maybe in your car, wondering, okay, when is it going to turn? When is it going to be my turn? I see everybody else on Instagram, Twitter, living their best life now. Joel Osteen's book, and when am I going to get my piece of the pie, as Jefferson's song used to be? I want people to understand there's this one thing: God's put a passion in each and every one of our hearts. Go back to that passion. I went back to the passion that I was when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and when I had met my first reporter. When I was in elementary school, and I said, that's what I want to be. I see how much joy this man had. His name was Silas Alexander. I'll never forget him. And he was a weatherman. And he said, I asked him, why do you do this? He said, I love it. I love talking with people. I love being out and experiencing the world. And I said, that's what I wanted to do. And so you talked about earlier about young John Reid. I say, go back to what young you, and to the person who's listening, oh, man, I can't do that. Oh, yes. You have breath in your body. If you have breath in your body, you have that opportunity. It's never too late. It's never too late, and going whatever it takes to study. I didn't just wake up one morning, crack open a computer, and say, all right, here's the piece of perspective. It took over a year. It took over a year of work to get this point because I had to put in the legwork. When anything, I'm talking, my brother here, he can tell more than anybody. He puts in the legwork. Becoming disciplined wasn't just an idea that he came up with. It was something that came from years of victories and years of setbacks to get to this point. And so, and for many people who have been on this show, and so I say it to each and every one of you watching right now. Number one, it's never too late. Number two, put the legwork in today. Put in the legwork will mean you have to say no to some things. And in some cases, some people. Doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make you wrong. Now, obviously, we want to make things. Number one thing we want to make sure is that we're hearing from God. And number two, if it's of God, He will make it happen. And He's telling to those who may not believe. I ask you, I simply say this: what do you want written on your epitaph?
Mm.
What do you want written? And I always share this with people, that when I look back on my eulogy and I wrote, journalist, and I said, well, that's not how I finished my story. So finish your story, because no one can tell it but you.
That was our brother John Reid. If you enjoyed him as much as we did, please check out his Pride and Joy, the Prince William Perspective, Virginia's anti-racist voice.